Tariff uncertainty is reshaping risk for Singapore manufacturers. Unclear U.S. policies are disrupting trade, and tariffs now hit tax, legal, risk, and finance, not just logistics. To discuss this, we have Kala Anandaraja of Raja and Tan Singapore and Shafika Abdul Samad of KPMG. Welcome, Kala and Shafika. Can you tell us what's happening? How exposed are Singapore manufacturers to U.S.-linked tariff changes today?
Singapore manufacturers are exposed in high-value sectors, typically the semiconductors and also pharmaceutical, but the country's transshipment hub status cushions some of these effects. So for semiconductors, while the latest US tariff on advanced chips may have minimal immediate impact on Singapore, as most affected chips are produced elsewhere in the region, there remains some indirect exposure due to Singapore's significant role in semiconductor packaging, assembly, and testing. That said, pharmaceutical and also biomedical sector, the US remains as a key export destination, accounting for about 13% of Singapore's domestic exports to the US. So in this case, some manufacturers may have ramped up production in 2025 to build inventory ahead of tariffs, which is showing significant reliance on the US demands. Despite the fact that Singapore non-oil domestic exports grew to 4.8% in 2025, though some economists already caution that 2026 may be more challenging as front-loading of shipments and tariffs pressure intensify. Reciprocal tariff policy may raise Singapore baseline tariff, which is existingly at 10%, and also taking into consideration penalties up to 40% if goods are deemed to have been transshipped to evade tariffs.
Singapore manufacturers are very exposed, particularly manufacturers with strong US end markets or links into US-bound regional supply chains will be significantly exposed. We're looking at direct exposure and we're looking at indirect supply chain related exposure with the Liberation Day tariffs that kicked in, even where products which had zero rates were now subjected to various levels. Over the last few days, the Trump administration has indicated that they will increase this baseline rates to 15% or more. And the question then comes up as to whether this is going to have a major impact on businesses in Singapore. As a final point on this, even sectors without a huge direct export to the US can feel pressure simply because of delayed orders, cost increases on intermediate goods. So it's indirect and the implications can be severe.
So what should we watch out for? What are the most common compliance gaps companies overlook under new tariff rules?
So in terms of compliance gap, often these stems from operational blind spots rather than customs processes alone. There are about 4 components that I will explain here. The first one is transshipment risk. So companies may overlook rules penalizing goods routes through Singapore to bypass tariffs, which can actually cause higher penalty rates, right? And the second one would be like hidden compliance triggers. So this is one of the areas that are often overlooked. Risks extend beyond customs paperwork. So breaches may cause unintentional through shipping terms, inventory flows, and pricing structure if not carefully managed.
Now, given the tariff rules introduced, the slip-ups have potentially increased. And some of the biggest slip-ups include misclassification of goods. Goods are generally given an identity number. We call them the Harmonized System Tariff Code or HS codes. The US tends to use the 8 or 10-digit level, but not all countries necessarily do that. And that potentially gives rise to misclassification. And misclassification can mean underpayment or overpayment. The product comprises of multi-levels of different products that come together. And these different raw materials have different HS codes. So when they come together, assessing and getting the right HS code is very important. This goes back to where the products may have been manufactured. This one requires very careful analysis and thinking the issue through. In short, country of origin. This does not mean there are no implications in other countries. Singapore takes misclassification of country of origin very strictly as well. Another element, a misunderstanding of the tariff exclusion list. Now, with the tariff rules, there are always exclusions that apply. If you do not understand this clearly or carefully, you may erroneously believe that you fall under the exemption. But the reality is you don't. And again, potential issues come up.
And as a workaround for that, what should companies track now to anticipate the next wave of tariff shifts?
So to stay ahead of tariff volatility, companies must monitor both policy signals and as well as operational exposure metrics. The first one is to definitely strengthening the scenario planning. So having multiple tariff scenario and test supply chain resilience periodically as global trade dynamics continue to evolve and remain fluid. The second one they could work on is to monitor the geopolitical developments. So businesses should always stay updated on the latest geopolitical to keep up and monitor US trade negotiation and the reciprocal tariff announcement, so you can make relevant changes where necessary. The third one will be track regulatory changes. So along with these signals, keep a close watch for removal of exemptions and also new sector-specific tariffs if there's any that's coming up. So the next one would be use diversification matrix. So it's very important to measure supplier concentration, so customer dependency and also market exposure to identify and mitigate risk associated with any over-reliance on specific sources or markets. So this is very critical because in a sudden shift in tariffs or any regulatory changes, which could have a very significant impact on the business in case of over-reliant on a very limited set of suppliers, customer market, or origin source. And the last one is to deploy strategic stimulation tool. It's always good to have a strategic tool in place to be used to stimulate future condition, be it AI or a simple dashboard BI tool or anything that works for the organization, and not to predict perfectly, but definitely to just be better prepared than competitors.
With tariff shifts starting from last year in particular, there has been quite a bit of volatility, and it reduces the ability to definitively plan. So how do we anticipate and in a sense prepare for what may come? I think the most important is really understanding your products, understanding the classification of your products. If necessary, work with your own local customs authority to get that classification correct, or work with experts to try and make sure that is correct. At the moment, we are all watching what the US trade policy announcements are going to be, how it could change from month to month, year to year, and so on. But it's not just a question of the US. We do need to also be looking at what potentially some of the other countries do in reaction to the US, because that could have an implication as well on businesses in Singapore. I want to very, very quickly touch on data flow as well. And in terms of how you manage your dashboards and pull your data together, looking at shipment data according to tariff classifications, looking at the cost movements attributable to that tariffs, determining customer pricing, demand shifts in response to duty changes.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights, Kala and Shafika.
Thank you and goodbye.
You're most welcome.
Once again, those were Kala Anandaraja, Head of Competition and Antitrust and Trade for Raja and Tan Singapore, and Shafika Abdul Samad, Principal Advisor for Trade and Customs at KPMG. For more news, visit manufacturing.asia.